official Morehead State
Yeah, okay.
notebook here.
Is that in your shot? Is there the?
I don't think so. Let's see. No. Alright. Almost it right here. You just look straight at me here. Alright, well, thank you so much, Dr. Ellis, for taking the time to chat with us today. Very excited to talk to you.
Very good.
You've come highly recommended as a historian and I believe it was put to me, the premier historian of the town of Morehead, the county, and the university. So, very well recommended. Everything look good?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Start off with, tell us where you were born, your history of growing up in this great town.
Well, when I was born, the year was 1927. In January of 1927. Now you have to remember there were no all-weather roads in Round County at that time. My uncle had just lost a baby a few weeks before that because they couldn't get into Morehead to see a doctor. So by being in January, I was born in January 1927, my mother came into town and lived with an aunt there, and I was born on Daniels Avenue, which is a little street that runs from Main Street up to Sun Street there behind what is now the Share Building. I was born in a little house there on Daniels Avenue, January the 10th, 1927. I was, of course, I don't remember anything about that except, the information that my parents left me. My mother was a school teacher, and she came into school every summer here at the normal school, and then when it changed into a college, she continued her education. And she would bring me with her, and I would stay with her during the and live with her in a dormitory there on campus. And we had an aunt that was in school there, and she would take care of me while my mother was in class and vice versa. So that's some of the ways that my mother got her education, and of course influenced me and directed me into education.
So start off with here again. What exactly was the Round County War?
Well, the Round County War was actually the seeds of some other conflicts that we had around here. The seeds of it, I've not gotten into a great detail about. I've written some things about the Round County War. It was from 1864 to 1867 for about 3 years, and there were 21 people killed in those 3-year period, and nobody ever brought to trial, let alone convicted of any wrong. But it was a wild place here during that time. The railroad was coming through at that time. The railroad came through about 1867 when it got finalized through Morehead here. But Morehead was a wild place, and it was a railroad town, and it was a town where all the surrounding people drove their cattle in and loaded them on the car. It was the railhead in the Western movies that you read about, where they drove their cows in to the railroad and shipped them, and Morehead was a railhead for that.
Now, what role did the C&O Railroad have in the feud? Wasn't there a shootout or something on the train car or something like that?
Actually, there was a shootout on the train car that I know of that involved my uncle, but I don't know for sure that was involved in the Round County War. It was my uncle, Jack Carter, who was coming on a train from Lexington to Morehead. This would have been in the early 1900s. And someone came through and said, there's a fella on this train that's going to kill you, going to shoot you. So he pitched my uncle his gun there, and a few minutes this fella came through the train there, to kill Jack Carter, and Jack killed him. Now, this is a story that is told. I don't know how true or accurate it is, but that's the story that I know about that on the train. Now, of course, the train was stopped at one time down in Farmers there because of some of the things that were going on here in Morehead. But that's a different story. I don't really know that much about that.
Well, let's talk about the original Morehead Normal School. Do you have knowledge of the history of?
The normal school began in 1864, which was a wild time here in Morehead. It was a bloody time. There were feuds going on. And I'll take that back. It actually began in 1867. The feud went on 1884 to 1867. And now his name slips me. He and his mother were Frank Button, and his mother were in Lexington down there, and he was in school down there. And they, as a result of all the killing that was going on there, they decided to come to Morehead to set up the Christian church, the Disciples of Christ. Now, I had a cousin that was Frank Button's secretary, and she was his secretary when he first came here, and she said that he was more proud of establishing the Christian church here in Morehead than he was the normal school. He talked about the church more than he did the normal school. But that's what brought it here. They saw all the killing in 1864 to 67, and then when it ended in 67, they came and set up the normal school. And it began with one student, and then later on it grew and so forth into into what is now Morehead State University.
Well, from the histories on Frank Button, would he be considered almost a visionary?
He was, and I think maybe he was just a young man then at that time, and I think his mother was a motivating influence for him. But I think she would be called the visionary. She could see the possibilities, I think, of what was available and what could happen in this community. And as a result of that, but he was just a young man, about 20 or 21 years old at that time.
The state picked up Morehead as a site for Teachers College in 1922. Was Morehead being chose to be a college controversial at that time?
Oh, yes, very controversial. It's ironic how this is really what brought Morehead here. A fellow by the name of Ed Maggard got a patent on the motion picture projectors. This was at the time motion pictures were just getting started, and he got a patent on a device that made him a lot of money. And he had a motion picture projector, and he also went around made movies. Now there we're talking about in the early 20s there, and he made movies. Now, when they decided, there was an argument between the legislature, between Paintsville and Morehead, where the university would go. Well, Allie Young was one of the chief politicians in Frankfort at that time, and he was from Morehead. And so he was fighting to get this. But now this is what swayed the bunch. A fellow named Ed Maggard made a movie, motion picture, a movie, and it involved this. Everybody in Morehead one Sunday morning dressed up in their Sunday best and went down and got on the train about 10 o'clock that morning, and the train backed up out of Morehead. So it came into Morehead. All these people got off dressed in their Sunday best and went around in the 2 or 3 cars that were in Morehead. They had a policeman out there directing traffic, and the same cars up on First Main Street, and so, but all these people got off of the train. Now, I'm told that the train backed up a time or two, and they reloaded, and they came off. 3 or 4 bunches of them came off, but then they all went up on campus, there at the time that they were trying to decide whether to have a university. Now, Ed Maggard was the motion picture man, and he was cranking all this up on film, and he went down and showed this to the committee that was arguing and fighting over where the projector would go. Of course, they had this school already here, and they had this film set up of them walking across the street and the policemen there and the cars there and on up on campus, and they had made the pictures of what was already there of the normal school and so forth. So I consider Ed Maggard and his motion picture projector the influencing factor of what brought the school here to Morehead, because look what they do with movies now just to advertise.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about being ahead of his time.
Oh, yeah. So you mentioned Allie Young there. He was a local guy and a state politician.
Allie Young was a strong politician. Allie Young and his daughter, he had this daughter when he was 61 years old, and he was pretty proud of her. Her name was Jane. And he lived right across the street from us on Main Street there. And Jane and I went through Breckenridge, 12 years together up at Breckenridge in the same grade. We're still good friends. Jane's still around. She's still living. Allie Young's youngest daughter, and say she was born when he was 61 years old. And but Allie Young was one of the influencing factors that brought the school here. He was a strong political in politics in Frankfort, and of course the legislature was the one to make the decision, and he was credited with getting it.
And they brought Frank Button back in as the first president.
Yes, Frank Button was been president of the normal school, and they brought him back in as first president of the state normal school. It was first called, it was a Christian normal school, and then it was the normal school. Then it was the state normal school. When the state took it over, they took over, and it's called state normal school.
Tell us a memory of going to school at Breckenridge.
Well, those were the days. Breckenridge was a school, a 12th grade demonstration school here on campus, where they taught teachers to teach. And each of the 12 teachers at Breckenridge were supposed to be master teachers. And since they were training teachers at the college, the teachers, while they were students, had to come over and observe the teachers as they taught there. And then they had to do so much practice teaching under those teachers there before they went out to teach. And we used to, my friend and me changed our names when the student teachers took over one of our classes, and I gave him my name, and he gave him my name, and I gave him his name, and they called us that the whole semester. But we used to play some tricks on the student teachers there. But it was quite an experience, and it was a good time.
And you said you showed us a picture a minute ago. You could look left from the entrance of Breckenridge and see nothing else, could you?
Oh yes, nothing there except the cemetery. When I was in Breck, there was nothing there east of Breckenridge at all. One little house sitting there, one little house between the whole, and then you see the cemetery there and the tombstones. You can see them plainly there, east of Breckenridge.
So you were around before you went into World War II, or I don't know if it was before or after, but were you around at the time of the Blue Jackets on campus?
Oh yes, well this was actually during World War II. The Navy was brought in here to Morehead, and they were actually into an electrical school. The president at the Morehead at that time, and Honey Rice was an engineer who took care of all the buildings and everything on campus there. And they went to Washington, D.C. at the beginning of World War II and talked with some people up there. And then they came back and went up to a college that had been taken over by the government, and they were training soldiers there and so forth. So they decided they could put in a school. So they got the electrical equipment to train electricians here. And so we had the Morehead Navy was in Morehead for about 3 years. And when they left here, they were fully prepared to go on board any ship or submarine in the Navy and be a working electrician when it went on. Now, I'm told the difference is we are on AC and the Navy is on DC. Now, I don't know what the difference is, but that was the difference. But when they left here, they were fully prepared to be working members of a crew on a ship or on a submarine.
Was it controversial bringing the Navy in here?
No, it was not. It was, we were proud, and the people were proud to have the Navy here. And we had a USO in downtown, United Service Organization, and it was open every night and on weekends, and the community had dances, and we had the surrounding counties. They would be responsible for one weekend to provide entertainment and dancing and so forth. And Carter County, Bath County, Lewis County, Morgan County, all the surrounding counties took turns of coming in here and hosting it. The Navy, of course, I was at a time, I was in high school, early high school when the Navy was here. So I graduated in '44, right in the middle of World War II from high school. But I was here when the Navy came, and I was at Breckenridge, and you could look out. Now the dormitory where they lived and worked and so forth was in the dormitory right next to Breck, and I forget the name of it, but it's the old dormitory right next to Breck there. And they also, we had Mays Hall was built there, and they also had Mays Hall in which they lived and worked. And it was quite a sight to see, 500 sailors in full dress uniforms marching up and down Main Street and the boulevard. It was just something you just seemed like it was out of place. And we have some pictures. I have some pictures of the sailors. Now, can you imagine somebody from Brooklyn joining the Navy, going to Great Lakes Naval Training School to prepare to go on board a ship and then ship him to Morehead, Kentucky? We had a fellow by the name of Scatteregia. Can you imagine, in eastern Kentucky? Scatteregia, who got to be pretty well known here when he was here, and he married a local girl, a good friend of mine who actually was a classmate of mine at Breck there, that married Scat. It was his nickname. And they lived together, but they were divorced later in life. And she came back while I was here as director of libraries up there, and she died here, and they buried her over in Carter County. And after that, he died. And they had been divorced for years, but he requested that he be buried next to her. And in order for him to do it, they had to get approval from the family there, and they did. And of course, you can't imagine of the names on tombstones over there of Jones and Smith and then Scatteregia.
So I guess a lot of the men were gone to the war at that time.
Oh yes, all the men were all in war, and they were all gone. And of course, I retired I'll turn this. I retired. I mean, I was still in high school when the war began, and graduated, as I say, in '44 in the middle of the war. And I enlisted in the service at the age of 17. I've got papers over there and so forth, the age of 17. And I was still in high school when I enlisted. And when I graduated from high school, I went directly into the Army Specialized Training Program there. I didn't know I was going into that. That's what you don't know when you put that uniform on what you're going to be doing, but that's what they had me doing. And I had the awfulest time trying to figure out how to get out of that. And I finally figured out how to get out of it. And I got out of it and was in the Army Air Corps during World War II.
Were you a pilot?
No, I was just a young kid. See, I was young. Now, I was in Europe, as I say, a part of the Army Air Corps. And when we took over Germany, when the war ended, I was sent over, and I was in charge of the officers' billets. That's rough duty, but somebody had to do it. No, you don't know what you're going to be doing. But I picked up German real quick. And my CO, my commanding officer there, recognized that. So he kept me with him pretty close and kept me around pretty close and took me on several special missions. In fact, he came in and said, "Come on, we're going. Come on, get your jacket and coat. We're going up to." Names are just not coming back to me like they used to. Where they had the Nuremberg. Oh, it was Nuremberg. Nuremberg trials. That's where it was. Said we're going. We've got to go up to Nuremberg. It was a long drive where we went and over that roads that were bombed out and everything. And we drove up there, and when we got there, I never will forget that building. It was about 4 or 5 stories high, and there wasn't a window anywhere in it. It was a prison, see? And the sirens were blasting and going everywhere, and we stopped and asked somebody what's going on. And they said, well, Goring had committed suicide. But we just happened to get there the day. But we'd taken someone up there to testify in some of the trials that they had there.
So when did you start attending college? After the war?
Yes, after I got home New Year's Eve, 1946. New Year's Eve, 1946. The war was over, of course, but I had to stay in an extra year afterwards, and that's how I kept from being shipped over to. I always had a fear of being sent to a desert island in the South Pacific and being a spotter and being the only one. I always had a fear in my mind for that, being the only one on that desert island. And so I was on my way out, and I was in Denver, Colorado, and trying to figure out a way out. I could get out of that, and I came across something. Said, if you agree to stay in for a year after the war's over, we'll send you anywhere you want to go now. So that's what I did, and they sent me to Europe, because that's where I wanted to go anyway in the first place. So I was in Europe during World War II.
And you came back to school at Morehead?
And then I came.
Bill?
Yes, I came under the GI Bill at Morehead there. As I say, I got here, and so I started in actually 40. Well, actually it was 46. I started, and of course the school was full of GIs, and of course the colleges were filled in every other state in the Union except Kentucky. I mean, we got them here from New Jersey and Baltimore, Maryland, and guys coming in here to go to college. And we had quite and most all of them were veterans of World War II, but it was a good time. It was a good time here, and we all knew what each other had gone through, and we all supported each other and took care of each other. Of course, John Collis was the one here that was here so long. He came. I remember when he came. I was still. I don't think I'd enrolled up there yet when he came, but a lot of other came from other states here to go to college.
And then you started working on campus after you graduated, or did you go on to library school?
Well, I started out as a bookmobile librarian right after I got my bachelor's degree, driving a bookmobile and going to all the schools, 1- and 2-room schools in Round County, and on a regular schedule, and providing library service for that. And then the librarian up there, I took all the library science they had here and talked me into going to Vanderbilt. Told me I should go down there and get a master's. So I went down to Vanderbilt and got a master's. And of course later on I went on down to University of Southern Mississippi and got a doctorate. But that was much later on. But I started out here in the bookmobile librarian here in Round County.
And then you got your master's and started working at the library?
I started, when I graduated from Vanderbilt, I went to Florida. Adrian Dorn offered me a job up here, and I refused it as graciously as I thought I could. and the letter that I wrote him, because I had some family in Florida at that time, and told him I would be going on to Florida. And boy, I could have got a job at the Cape then when the Cape was just getting started. They offered me a job, but I didn't. They said, now if you can work with engineers who really are on you, I want this right now, you know, we want you down here. And then I said, well, I don't think I want to go there. So I went to school system in Clearwater, St. Petersburg, Pinellas County, and was supervisor of libraries in that county. And for about, we were in Florida about 8 or 9 years. And then I was in my office down there in Florida, and a man walked in, a piece of paper, and handed me and said, write down here how much you have to go to work for us. And I blinked about 3 times. I said, are you serious? And he said, I'm serious as a heart attack. That's the first time I'd ever heard that. I said, I'm serious as a heart attack. So you go home and talk with Mommy and see what she said. Well, they said, you can still live right where you live. So they gave me the whole state of Florida. I was working for Esquire magazine, which had an educational division. They did publish textbooks and library books. I worked for Esquire magazine's educational division as a consultant in Florida. And then my wife, we were both only children. And my wife's mother got real sick. And she was having to come up here and help take care of her. And then she was torn between taking care of her mother and her kids in Florida. And so we decided we'd come back to Morehead. And so I could live anywhere in the United States I wanted to live then, they said. And so I know I went to the board meeting up in Chicago after we moved back. I was supposed to live in Chicago. They wanted me to move to Chicago, and my wife, it wasn't any way she was going to do that. So I came down here, and they used to introduce me at the board meetings up there as being a member of their central management staff in Chicago, for the privilege of living in Morehead, Kentucky. I traveled all over the United States for them, and had quite some experiences. California, visited a lot of universities and a lot of colleges and so forth.
And then when did you get the job as a director of libraries on campus?
Okay, well, there again, see, I had refused a job that Doran had offered me, and they said, well, you ain't got a chance. Nobody's not going to hire you. So I came back, and while I was here, Miss Chapman, who was the librarian in charge of the library then, gave me a little office in the library that I could work out of when I was traveling, you know. And she kept saying, I'm going to retire, I'm going to retire. And why don't you take this job? Why don't you take this job? And I said, well, I might, you know, consider it if he wants me. But anyway, evidently he had forgiven me for refusing the job, because he did. Doran hired me, and Adrian Doran was quite a person, I'm telling you. He was a study unto himself. The deans, I was a member of the central deans. I think we called them something else. I forget now what it was then, but it was the deans, and I was a librarian. I was one of them, and we'd go to the meetings every Monday. And boy, the room would just be full of smoke. Everybody smoked then. Of course, Doran came. They all put them all out. He wouldn't let them smoke when he was there. And yeah, that's how I got started up here at the library. Miss Chapman decided she wanted to retire, and I guess I decided I'd traveled enough. So, and Doran. Warren Lappin was the vice president, and that he was we only had one vice president, and that was him. And he said, we don't need any other vice presidents. So, and he was the vice president then. Of course, I knew him. He'd been at Breckenridge as principal when I was a student over there, but he forgave me, I guess, for turning the job down. He could understand it maybe more than Doran did, but anyway, Doran did hire me, and we got along beautifully. I got along real well with President.
Talk about Warren Lappin for a minute. I've read things and I've seen photographs of him, and he looks stern. Is he a
Oh.
stern man?
Well, now you have to remember, he was principal at Breck when I was a little student there. And his office was there in the front door. And I wouldn't even go through the front door. I was that scared of him. I would come through the end door, at the end there, and went into Breck. He was the most stern, austere person you can find. But when you got to know him, he was a peck of fun. I got to know him later on when I was a librarian here. After I got out of school, I was a librarian, and went to KEA in Frankfurt down there and attended some meetings with him, and got ready to. And I was coming home, and he wanted to come home early. So he rode back with me, and I brought him back, and boy, he was a peck of fun. He was telling jokes and everything. But I never did know him in that respect when I was on campus. But boy, he was very stern.
Well, you talked about Adrian Dorr, and he's a legendary man when people tell stories about him.
Oh.
What was Dr. Dorn like?
I remember Dr. Dorn when he came in 1954. He came out of the legislature. He was a political something down there. He was in politics, heavily in politics, and he evidently got on the wrong side of the people in Frankfurt down there, because they wanted to get him out of that job. He was Speaker of the House, and that was a pretty powerful position, and they wanted to get him out of that because they didn't like what he was doing. So the governor at that time appointed university presidents. So the governor appointed him president of Morehead if he would resign from that position, get him out. Now that's what brought him to Morehead. They wanted to get rid of him down there, and he was willing to go if he'd be president of the university. Adrian Dorn, I got along very well with him. We were at a meeting one time, the dean's meeting every week. We were there. So I was at a meeting one time there, and he said, "Well, we haven't done anything for Jack lately." And said, he'd been wanting a new library. And I'm about ready to get it for him. So that's how come we was to get the library tower when I was there. I guess maybe I might consider that as being one of my best accomplishments, getting that library tower up there. Now, it was originally set up for 7 stories, and we had the plans already drawn. They were approved and everything. But just before that time, there was a supper club fire in northern Kentucky that 160 people burned up in it before they could get out of there. You can't imagine the publicity, and you can't imagine the criticism and who did it and why and so forth that was going on here in the state at that time. But as a result, any construction or any new buildings, you had to be pretty fireproof before you did it. So that was set up for 7 stories, and there were all kinds of regulations that we had to do if we went above 5 stories. And so as a result of that, we cut it down to 2 stories, and it really should be 7 stories. We need more space up there, as everybody knows, in the library now. But we just don't have it.
Was Adrian Dorn the right man for the job in the era he was here?
I do. I think he did a good job. He got the money. He could get the money. And that's what makes, and got all the buildings built during that time that he was here, all the construction that went on, all the people that he hired. He could pay professors whatever he wanted to pay them, because I was making a pretty good salary. Well, I'll tell you what it was then. I was making $18,000 a year as a consultant for Coronet Educational Films. And that's when I decided I wanted to quit traveling so much, And so somebody said, "Won't you go over and," Miss Chapman, wanted me to go and apply for her job. And I did, and I remember I said, now, Dr. Dorn, I said, I'm making $18,000 a year, and I won't take any less than that. Oh, now I don't know now about that, you know. I don't know about that. But in sort of a sarcastic way, you know. I don't know. But yeah, he could pay whatever he wanted to pay, whatever.
Yeah, he's had the famous phrase, "The bus goes east, the bus
Oh
goes west."
yeah, the bus going east and the bus going west. Yeah, we gave him a bus there that I don't know, it's somewhere, maybe it's in the library or something somewhere, that's been cut in two and welded to put back together, the bus going east and bus going west.
That was his catchphrase. Question for you about the desegregation era. Was you around campus when desegregation happened?
Yes, I was, and then yet we had an uproar here on campus. I was down in southern Alabama at a big university down there. Now the name of that university slips my mind, on an accreditation team. And when this was going on there, and the uproar was on campus, and the blacks were struggling and were trying to take over, and they were organized up there on campus. This what happened while I was down there, and I found out about it later on, and they were all ready to tear up Morehead. They were ready to tear up Morehead, and they got all ready to go downtown with their bricks and their clubs, and they're going to break out the businesses' windows and all that. And the business people heard about it, and then they all ran there with their guns. And they started out down through there, I'm told. There was about 100 of them, seeming like 80 or 90 or 100 of them. And they started out down there, and that came off as downpour of rain that ever was. And so that ended that. But it was, all the business people were in there ready with their guns. It would have been, might have been bad if that hadn't rained.
Dr. Andrews said at convocation this past January that Adrian Dorn was the last of the imperial presidents. And I interviewed Nelson Grody, Dr. Grody. He said he didn't like Adrian Dorn being called the last of the imperial presidents. What do you think about that? You think it's
Well, I think it's a pretty good phrase. Yes, Dorn did everything Dorn's way, and you couldn't disagree with him. If you did, you weren't here very long. No, I think that was a very good term myself, the imperial presidency of Adrian Dorn, because he did everything Adrian Dorn's way, and you didn't disagree with him. You might, but you didn't say much. No, I'd have to.
What about Honey Rice?
Oh, Honey, yeah.
He'd be an interesting person.
Yes, he was quite a character. He was a graduate of the University of Kentucky engineering school down there. He well qualified for what he was here to do, but he was responsible for all the buildings and grounds, of taking care of the buildings and grounds, and of maintaining them and so forth. And what most people don't know is that he and Warren Lappin and somebody else were the persons responsible for getting the Navy here. They made a trip to Washington, D.C., about 4 of them, saved their gas stamps and drove to Washington, D.C., and who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court from Eastern Kentucky up here, you know who I'm talking about, but I can't even think of his name. But he met them up there and showed them around. He was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, showed them around, and when they tried to get the Navy to set up here in Morehead. And that was their first step to do that. They'd already been up to see one college that had it, and then they went up there to get it approved, and they got it approved and got all the equipment shipped in here, and Honey was one that set up all the electrical equipment for the training of the Navy, electricians and so forth. He was very responsible for all that. Did a great job. And I don't know whether you know it or not, but when the Navy was in the swimming pool, they all went bare. They went swimming in the nude. And there's a path up there right down to the window, and they left that windows, some windows were open down there. And the Breck girls beat a path down there. Yeah, some of the Breck girls, I didn't know that at the time, but some of the girls had a path beat down there where they could peek through the window while they were in swimming.
Was Honey Rice a friendly fella?
He was quiet. I got to know Honey when I was about 12 years old, and he and about 4 people set up a camp over on Licking River, and they would go over there at the camp every night and stay till about 10 or 11 o'clock, and then they'd go home. But I was one of the teenagers that stayed there at the camp all the time, and that was a great experience too that I had, taking care of the camp with about 4 of us there, and then all those guys that come over there. We stayed all night and stayed there for the whole time, but they'd come over there and then they'd go back home. But Honey was he was a fine fella. I had a great respect for him.
All the photographs I see, he's got a cigar in his hand.
Yeah, I think he was a cigar smoker, and of course his son is still living. He lives in he had 2 boys, and both still may be living, but I know the one in Lexington is. But,
was Honey still alive when they named the Rice Building after him?
I don't, that'd be a good, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether it was or not. That'd be interesting. I don't know.
Is there any other people from the campus back in the old days that were good characters to talk about or to search?
Oh, Neville Fensel. Neville Fensel was a teacher here, and for the life of me right now, I can't tell you exactly what he taught. But he was all over the room when he was lecturing. He'd be up on his desk sitting cross-legged sometimes, or he'd be sitting down on the floor while he's talking, or in a chair, or up on the table, and then over in the window, and the windows, and they didn't have air conditioning then. And he was up on the 2nd floor of the building there. And he was sitting up there, and he fell out the window. I don't know, maybe he broke his arm or something, but yeah, that was. We had some characters that were on the faculty up there, so real.
What about the years following Adrian Doran? Did they struggle to find another president like Doran for a while?
Oh yes, we went through several presidents very fast here. They didn't stay very long. We had acting presidents, and we had, of course, Nelson Groves, not Nelson. Well, Nelson. I can't think of right now.
Right after Doran was Norfleet.
Norfleet, I guess that's who I was thinking of. Yeah, Norfleet. Norfleet was there and ended up being about the last of 3 or 4 that we went through. We had an acting one and had another one here from somewhere up east there that didn't stay very long. But then I think Norfleet came in, and I guess Norfleet did very well. I got along all right with Morris and Norfleet, and I think he used me pretty well. He used me in several responsible positions that he had me appointed to.
Next Norfleet would have been who? Reinhardt?
Reinhardt was one of them that was there, yeah. And
Albright, I believe.
Albright was there. He was another one that was in there. Yeah, he was there. Yeah.
Do you know any histories on William Baird?
William Jesse Baird. Yes, I can tell you a little bit about Baird. He was president here when I was in high school at Morehead. I went to old Morehead High School the last 2 years. I went to Breck 10 years and Morehead High School 2 years. But I was getting ready to graduate down here, and he stopped me on the street, and he knew my name. And he said, "Jack, now where are you going to go to college?" And I said, "Well, I probably go here, I guess." But I said, I've got to go in the Army. I'm getting ready to go in the Army now, and so forth. But that always impressed me, that he knew my name, and I always remembered it. Now, what's his name that we were talking about? Baird, yeah, Baird. Now, I got ready to go down to Vanderbilt to get a master's degree. And I went down there, and he was down there on the faculty. And, see, they got rid of him, and it was a political. And he's the one that said, when he left here, I'm going to take the university with me. Because this was during the accreditation problem. And he literally did. It was dropped from the accreditation list for a year. And he was never forgiven by anybody in this institution because of what he did. But when I went down to Vanderbilt, he looked me up. He was vice president down at Vanderbilt, and he looked me up, and he loved Morehead. He loved everything about Morehead and about Kentucky, and he loved to talk about people and ask me about people down there. And we'd talk for hours, a time or two down there. But his heart was really, really in Morehead and wanted the best for Morehead. But when he left, he got it dropped from the accredited list.
Well, Dr. Ellis, what has the university here meant to Eastern Kentucky as a whole?
Oh man, this university. I just see there was a struggle between Paintsville and Morehead about where the university would be located, and I've told you about how come Morehead got selected and so forth there. One of the reasons they got selected. But you look at Paintsville now, and look at Morehead now. It's unbelievable. The university has been the absolute making of this whole region, and it's even more influential now as time goes on. This university reaches into every county and every business and in the whole community and the whole surrounding region, Ashland, all the way around. It is a great influence upon the community, and we got a good president. We got a good man that's there now, I'll tell you. I think a lot of him.
Do you think Frank Button or Phoebe Button, they would have been able to foresee here in 2015 what this would come?
I don't think they would have any idea. And as I said, my aunt, who was Frank Button's secretary, first secretary, and then secretary to every president of Morehead, all the way up to Norfleet. She was secretary after she was secretary of Button. She was all the way through Dorn's area and all the way through up there. And she said that Button was more proud of the church than he was the school. He talked more about it and was more prouder of the church than he was the school.
Now, when people look back on the university, they always think about Adrian Dorr, and I think
Yes.
that's funny.
He'll always be synonymous with this institution, and I have the greatest respect for him. I worked with him. I got along well with him. He treated me real well. Got a new building there for me, and built a new building. And he was a builder. And at a time when we were growing, at a time we needed those buildings. I don't believe that Morehead would be nearly the institution that it is now if somebody else had been there besides Adrian Dorn. He knew how to get the money.
I heard a story once that there was a Vietnam-era protest on campus, and they were protesting the Kent State shootings. They were protesting here on Morehead's campus. And Adrian Doran went right in the middle of the crowd. He said, "With within 10 minutes, he had the whole crowd leading a prayer.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and that went on when I was down at that other institution. That was what was going on there, that then. Yeah, he did that. And Doran was, I just can't say enough good things about him. He was a stern taskmaster.
You know, I've read that some of the black students said they felt more comfortable at Morehead and then went on to school at UK. I think it was Dr. Marshall Banks that said that it was actually a shock because the small town of Morehead, because of Adrian Doran, was more open to them than Lexington was.
Yeah, I think that's true, and it was true. Doran was ahead of his time in that respect, very definitely. We did not have we did not have a black community here. We had 2 or 3 black families, and they were all good people. Everybody loved them and were crazy about them. I was trying to think my experience with some of the blacks. I had an experience, but right now I've forgotten it.
Morehead was first state school to desegregate dormitories, and first state school to have a black OVC player.
Uh-huh.
It was on first there for that.
Yeah, they were leaders in that respect, and I think that's Doran's influence. Yeah.
Now, did you know Dr. Donald Flatt?
Don Flatt, uh-huh. I knew Don very well, uh-huh. What is he? He wrote a history of
He did, Life in the Mountains.
Back to the Mountains, uh-huh. And he got a year or 2 off to do that, too.
That's a pretty good time.
Yeah, that is, uh-huh.
Well, I think that's all the questions I got for you.
Well, we hope we've sort of hit on some of them there. I do,
yeah.
And it's just, let's see.
I enjoy talking.
Here it says, when did you start attending college? Me, it took me a long time to get through college. I guess you can say I started attending here in about 19, I'm trying to think exactly when. I got home in 45, I started in 46, but I don't think I graduated till 5. I went part-time, and then I worked and went part-time.
Here's another question for you. Back in the 50s, what buildings were used for the classrooms? The Lappin Hall?
Lappin Hall was the classroom building, yes. The other one was a girls' dormitory and a boys' dormitory, and then men's dormitory, and then Breckenridge. Button was there, but yeah, it was the classroom building.
Now, Allie Young Hall, was that used just as a dorm, or was it?
It was a dorm, and it had a cafeteria in the basement. When my mother was in school there, the cafeteria was in the basement, and she used to take me up there and take me in the cafeteria.
Gosh, I went down there, looked around, you can't even see anything that looks like.
Can't imagine it wasn't, I guess.
I've read there used to be a water pump outside.
Yes, it's still there, isn't it?
You know, I'm gonna have to go look.
Yeah, you look, I think that pump is still there. It was, the last time I looked, it may not be there though now.
Recording pump or something?
Yeah, the pump where they used to get the water from the normal school, when the normal school was there. One of those old pumps. It's between, I can't next to the names of those buildings now.
The Allie Young and
It's right across from the president's office.
Oh, okay. That's
And it's up on that sidewalk that connects those 2 buildings up. Right up there on the side. Look and see if it's not there. It seemed like it was there the last time I
read
went up
about
there.
that
Yeah.
in Donald Flatt's book.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, I sure do appreciate you talking.